All right, so welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into,
Into some pretty choppy waters.
yeah, choppy waters, maybe even uncharted territory.
That's a good way to put it.
All because of President Trump's, well, I guess you could call it a proposal regarding the Palestinian refugees in Gaza after this recent Israel-Hamas ceasefire.
Right. And I think what's really interesting here is that we've got all these international news sources, and the reactions are coming from every direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just your typical political back and forth either.
Oh, definitely not. This is hitting a nerve globally.
Okay, so can we break this down a little bit?
Sure.
I mean, what exactly did Trump say?
Basically, he's suggested that Egypt and Jordan take in a huge chunk of Gaza's Palestinian population.
Like, how many are we talking about?
Potentially 1.5 million people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
And he wants to do this to clean out Gaza.
Clean out.
Yeah, his words. And he actually referred to Gaza as a demolition site at one point.
Okay, I can already see why that phrasing might not be going over so well.
Oh, it's causing a major uproar. First of all, that kind of language completely ignores the fact that...
We're talking about people with deep roots in Gaza.
Exactly. And then there's the logistical nightmare.
Oh, right, like where would all these people even go?
Exactly. Gaza's already incredibly densely populated, resources are scarce, adding that many people to Egypt and Jordan would just overwhelm them.
So Egypt and Jordan are saying no.
Oh, they rejected the idea immediately.
I mean, it does make sense, though, like Egypt especially.
Oh, yeah. Egypt is already dealing with millions of migrants and refugees.
Really?
Yeah, including a large Sudanese refugee population. They're worried about further destabilizing the region.
So they don't want another Lebanon situation.
Exactly. Remember back in the 1970s?
Well, when the PLO was there.
Right. The presence of the Palestine Liberation Organization in Lebanon contributed to a 15-year civil war.
And they're saying bringing a massive influx of Palestinians into Egypt or Jordan could lead to the same thing.
That's their concern, and it's a valid one, I'd say.
And hasn't Jordan taken in a ton of Palestinian refugees already?
Oh, absolutely. Over 2 million.
So they're basically saying we've done our part.
Yeah, pretty much. And both Jordan and Egypt have also expressed concerns about this proposal jeopardizing their existing peace agreements with Israel.
It sounds like a lose-lose situation for everyone involved.
Pretty much. And it gets even more complicated when you factor in the Palestinian perspective.
Oh, right. What are they saying about all this?
The Palestinian Authority immediately condemned Trump's proposal, calling it a violation of their, quote, red lines.
That's a pretty strong statement.
And Hamas, who govern Gaza, called it aligning with Israeli schemes.
So basically everyone is against it.
It seems that way. But even more compelling are some of the interviews coming directly from Palestinians living in Gaza.
What are they saying?
There are these really heartbreaking interviews in Al Jazeera where residents talk about their connection to their land and their fear of being displaced yet again.
Man, this is all bringing up some pretty heavy historical baggage, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. This proposal is stirring up a lot of painful memories, especially surrounding the Nakba.
The Nakba.
The Nakba, which translates to catastrophe in Arabic, refers to the mass displacement of Palestinians during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Hundreds of thousands were forced from their homes and their lands.
So this is a really sensitive subject.
Absolutely. It's a deeply traumatic experience that's embedded in Palestinian collective memory.
So I can only imagine how they must be feeling right now.
Hearing phrases like clean out is triggering a lot of fear and anxiety. It's like history is repeating itself.
And it doesn't seem like this proposal addresses any of those fears.
Quite the opposite. There's a deep-seated fear that any relocation, even if it's presented as temporary, could become permanent.
Right, leading to a loss of their homeland.
Exactly. And further dispossession. It's a complex situation, and this proposal is only making it worse.
And all the legal and ethical questions this is bringing up.
It's a minefield, really.
I mean, some legal experts are even going so far as to call Trump's proposal potential ethnic cleansing.
That's right, which is a very serious accusation, of course.
Could you maybe unpack that a bit for us?
Sure. Ethnic cleansing, while not officially defined under international law, is generally understood as the forced removal of an ethnic or religious group from a specific territory.
Right.
It often involves violence, intimidation, and human rights violations. In this case, these legal experts are arguing that forcibly transferring Palestinians from Gaza could be considered a war crime, especially given the lack of clarity regarding the time frame and the potential for coercion.
So this could have some serious international repercussions for the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. It puts the U.S. at odds with international law.
Yeah.
And it also goes against the stated goals of many key U.S. allies in the region, like Egypt and Jordan,
Right.
who have consistently supported a two-state solution and the rights of Palestinians.
It sounds like this whole thing is just backfiring spectacularly.
It really is. Alienating allies, creating more tension in an already volatile region. It's hard to understand what Trump was hoping to achieve with this.
I know. It's like, what's the end game here?
What's really puzzling is that he hasn't laid out a clear vision for post-war governance in Gaza.
Really? So
Right.
beyond the clean out and rebuild, there's no plan.
He's offered some vague ideas about rebuilding in a different way, but that's about it.
It's almost like he's fixated on the physical reconstruction.
And ignoring the human element.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
just rebuilding buildings isn't going to magically solve everything.
It's a very simplistic approach to an incredibly complex issue.
And didn't he make some comments about Gaza being a potential real estate opportunity?
Yeah, praising its location and weather. Which, given the level of suffering and loss there, it comes across as incredibly tone-deaf.
And on top of everything else, he just resumed shipments of those huge bombs to Israel. The ones Biden had paused because of the civilian casualties.
He did, and his justification was just because they bought them.
That's chilling. It's like he's completely disregarding the human cost of this conflict.
And the irony is, with this proposal, he's managed to upset just about everyone involved. Even some Republicans are voicing their doubts.
Really? Like who?
Well, Senator Lindsey Graham, for example. He's generally supportive of Trump, but even he said he doesn't believe this resettlement plan is actually feasible.
Wow. So it really does seem like this is more about politics than finding a solution.
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely raises that question.
Okay, so let's get into the why behind this proposal. What are some of the theories floating around?
Well, there's the theory that Trump is aligning himself with far-right Israeli politicians who advocate for Palestinian immigration as the solution.
So basically just get rid of the Palestinians and the problem is solved.
It's a very oversimplified view, but that's the gist of it.
And that would obviously appeal to a certain segment of his base.
Exactly.
Oh.
Another suggestion is that he's trying to pressure Arab countries into taking more responsibility for the Palestinian refugees.
Basically shifting the burden away from Israel.
Exactly. And then there's the grand bargain theory.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that one?
The idea is that this proposal is just the first step in a much bigger deal, something like Israeli annexation of the West Bank in exchange for Palestinian resettlement elsewhere.
Oh, wow, that would be huge.
It would.
Yeah.
But it's important to emphasize that this is all just speculation. For now, Trump hasn't actually confirmed anything.
So basically a lot of speculation and not a lot of answers.
It seems that way. But what is clear is that this proposal has really thrown a wrench into the already stalled peace process.
And it's creating even more instability in an already volatile region.
Exactly. And it remains to be seen what the long-term consequences of all this will be.
Yeah, this is a story that's definitely going to keep unfolding. And we'll be here to help you unpack it all. But for now, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll delve deeper into the motivations behind this controversial proposal and explore the international fallout. So we've talked about the reactions, or I guess lack thereof, to this proposal, but I'm still kind of stuck on the why.
Yeah, the motivation behind it.
Right. Why propose something that's so obviously going to cause more problems than it solves?
Well, some analysts are suggesting it's a way for Trump to play to his base.
Like a political strategy?
Yeah, basically. His strong support for certain policies in the region has always been a way to solidify those political alliances.
So he's willing to alienate your allies and potentially destabilize a whole region just to score points with his supporters.
It's certainly a cynical take, but it's one that's been floated.
There's got to be more to it than that, though.
Well, there's also the argument that this proposal, however flawed it might be, is at least trying to address a long-standing issue that's been ignored.
You mean the situation in Gaza?
Exactly. The situation there is desperate. Something has to change.
Okay, I see that point. But is mass relocation really the answer?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's interesting because even before taking office, Trump's team was already talking about resettling Palestinians.
They were?
Yeah. They even considered places like Indonesia.
Indonesia. Wow. So this idea has been brewing for a while then.
It seems that way. This current proposal isn't just a reaction to the recent conflict.
So maybe this is part of a larger strategy, just one that hasn't been fully explained yet?
It's possible. But regardless of the intent, this proposal is definitely shaking things up in the region.
How so?
Well, for one thing, it's forcing Arab leaders to face some difficult questions about their own role in this whole Palestinian refugee issue.
And their relationship with the U.S.
Exactly.
I mean, what about the peace process? I can't imagine this is going to help move things forward.
It's definitely thrown a wrench in things. It's alienated key players, increased mistrust, and created a whole lot of uncertainty about the future.
So how can any kind of meaningful negotiations happen in that environment?
It's hard to see how they can.
And what about the U.S.'s position as a mediator in all of this? Can the U.S. really be seen as an honest broker after pushing such a one-sided solution?
That's a question a lot of world leaders are asking right now. Trump's actions have definitely strained some relationships.
I'd say so.
And it's raised questions about America's commitment to finding a balanced approach to this conflict.
It feels like this proposal is just pushing us further away from a peaceful resolution, not closer.
It's a valid concern for sure. It raises the question, if resettlement is off the table, then what?
Right. What are the alternatives?
What are the solutions that could actually help rebuild Gaza and create economic opportunities?
While still respecting the rights of Palestinians.
Exactly, and avoiding even more instability.
I mean, the reports we've been looking at really highlight just how complicated all of this is.
Oh, it's a multi-layered problem.
Yeah, there's the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that needs immediate attention. Then there's the need to find a way for Palestinians to have self-determination.
And on top of that, you need to ensure security for everyone involved. It's a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution.
Exactly. We need to move past simplistic ideas and actually address the root causes of this conflict.
Not just the symptoms.
The problem is all these reports are full of people condemning the proposal.
Right.
But no one's offering any real alternatives.
Well, some experts are suggesting a focus on economic development.
In Gaza.
Yeah. They say that investing in Gaza could really improve the situation on the ground.
So instead of trying to move people out, focus on building up where they live.
Exactly. Invest in infrastructure, create jobs, empower Palestinians to rebuild their own lives.
That does sound good in theory.
It does.
But can it actually work? Gaza's been under blockade for years, and there's so much mistrust on both sides.
It's a huge challenge for sure.
It is.
But it's worth considering. This approach might actually be more successful in the long run than a forced resettlement plan that's clearly not working.
It all comes back to the human element, doesn't it?
It does.
All these reports, they're full of quotes from Palestinians in Gaza.
Their voices are so important.
One man told Al Jazeera, "The weak might leave because of the suffering, but the idea of us leaving our country, it's absolutely impossible."
That's powerful. It speaks to their resilience.
It does.
And their determination. But it's also incredibly sad.
It is. It shows that this conflict is about so much more than just territory.
Exactly. It's about identity, history, belonging.
It's easy to get lost in the politics and forget that we're talking about real people with real hopes and fears.
You're right. We need to approach the situation with empathy and understanding and recognize the complexity, the human cost.
I think this proposal, whether it was intentional or not, has started a really important conversation about what the future holds.
For Palestinians.
Yeah, for Palestinians, for the whole region.
I agree. And it's a conversation that needs to continue. We need to bring more voices into the conversation.
Especially the voices of Palestinians themselves.
Their experiences and their aspirations have to be at the forefront of any effort to find peace.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What should our listeners be taking away from this discussion?
I think this situation shows just how urgently we need a new approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We need to move past the failures of the past.
And find solutions that put justice, equality, and human dignity first.
Exactly. And we need to be careful about the language we use when talking about this conflict.
Terms like clean out and demolition site, those words are dehumanizing.
They are.
And they just perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
You're absolutely right. The way we talk about this conflict shapes how we understand it. It influences the solutions we're willing to even consider.
So let's all challenge ourselves to think critically about the narratives we're being presented with.
And seek out different perspectives.
And let's not forget the people at the heart of all of this.
The people whose lives are directly affected by the decisions being made.
Okay, so we've discussed what happened and why it might have happened.
Right.
We've looked at the international reactions, the ethical questions. We've even started to think about possible alternatives. But now I want to hear from you, the listener. What are your thoughts?
What stood out to you the most?
What resonates with you?
What questions are you left with?
We've only scratched the surface here, but hopefully this conversation has given you some food for thought.
This is a complex issue. There are no easy answers. But by engaging with it thoughtfully, by seeking out different perspectives, we can all start to understand the challenges ahead.
Okay, so we've talked about Trump's proposal, the reactions from around the world, the ethical questions, and even some possible alternatives. But now I want to bring it back to you, the listener. What are your thoughts on all of this? What stood out to you?
For me, it's the historical parallels that are really striking. The Palestinian experience of displacement and being forced from their land, it's not some abstract idea. It's a lived reality for millions of people.
And this proposal just kind of ignores all of that.
It does. Whether it's intentional or not, it seems to completely disregard that history, that trauma.
Yeah, and I was reading one of the reports that there was this quote from a Palestinian woman living in Gaza. She said, "If we wanted to leave, we would have done that a long time ago. We will remain no matter what happens."
Wow.
It's like this incredible resilience,
It is.
but it's also so heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really highlights that this conflict isn't just about land, it's about identity, about history, about belonging. And any solution that doesn't come from the Palestinians themselves is probably going to fail.
I think this proposal, even though it's been met with so much resistance, it's at least forced us to look at some of the uncomfortable truths about this conflict, power imbalances, the limitations of how we've been trying to solve this for so long.
It definitely has. And hopefully it started some important conversations about what the future could look like. I mean, if resettlement isn't the answer, then what is?
How can we build a future where Israelis and Palestinians can both live in peace and security?
These are the questions we need to be asking.
And as we're having these conversations, I think we really need to be careful about the language we're using. I mean, terms like clean out and demolition site, they're so dehumanizing.
They are. Even if they're not meant to be malicious, they can really perpetuate these harmful stereotypes.
The way we talk about this conflict, it matters.
Yeah.
It shapes how we understand the issues. It influences the solutions we're willing to consider.
It does.
So let's all make an effort to think critically about what we're hearing and make sure we're seeking out diverse perspectives.
I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge. If not resettlement, then what? What are the solutions that could actually help rebuild Gaza, create economic opportunities, but also respect the rights of Palestinians and make sure things don't become even more unstable?
There's no easy answer, but hopefully this conversation has given you something to think about.
We've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore. So I encourage you to dig into those sources we talked about, find some different perspectives, and maybe even challenge some of your own assumptions.
This is a complex issue with no easy answers. But by engaging with it thoughtfully, with empathy, we can all contribute to a better understanding of what's at stake and what the future might hold.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.